Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, the federal government's giving out billions of dollars to build something called hydrogen hubs. They make energy that's cleaner than fossil fuels, and Pennsylvania's about to get 2 of them, including one right here in western PA that also spans West Virginia and Ohio. That new energy, it's supposed to go toward things like fueling buses and heating homes. It all sounds like a pretty good deal, but some environmental advocates worry without the right regulations in place, these hydrogen hubs won't actually be as environmentally friendly as they seem. The first round of government funding is headed our way right now. So we decided to bring back a conversation from last year about the potential and the pitfalls of these projects. It's Monday, August 5th. I'm Mallory Falk, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with Kate Huang-Pu, government reporter for Spotlight PA. Kate, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Kate, the federal government is going to give out billions of dollars to create these hydrogen hubs across the country, and they're just what they sound like, these hubs that would produce and store energy. Let's start off basic here. Why are people so excited about hydrogen as an energy source?
Yeah, I think that the idea is that with climate change, we need to have all the tools in our arsenal to not increase the global temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius. So hydrogen is one way of doing that. When you burn hydrogen, there's no carbon emissions. It's just water. So in things like chemical production, long distance aviation, like other forms of fuel, steelworking, things that are emission heavy or heat heavy, like that produce a lot of heat, hydrogen is a really good alternative. It's, again, not going to produce any emissions.
But I've heard all forms of hydrogen are not created equal. Some are more environmentally friendly than others. And I guess there's actually this whole rainbow of colors out there. So could you break that down for us, maybe starting with blue hydrogen?
Yeah, so blue hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced using methane. So hydrogen is really, really bountiful, it's everywhere, but it's not commonly in a form that we can use to make energy. So you have to extract it from other things. One of the ways that's most common to do this is using methane. But when you're using methane to get hydrogen, you end up with carbon emissions, you end up with methane emissions. So blue hydrogen is when those emissions are produced, but you capture them and store them deep underground in injection wells. So there's a carbon capture and storage component to the hydrogen production.
And there are other ways to create hydrogen, the other colors?
Yeah, exactly. There's also, you could create hydrogen from renewable energy as well. Things like solar, wind, power plants, things like that, rather than methane. So that's what's called green hydrogen, and it's supposed to be, more energy or more environmentally friendly. There's no emissions whatsoever, and when you burn hydrogen, the only emission it ends up being water. So it's a lot better for the atmosphere.
Okay, let's finish out this rainbow. Tell me about the other colors.
Yeah. So there's so many kinds. There's pink is using nuclear energy. Orange is, the science is a little fuzzy for me. I'm not a science major, but using some form of bacteria to break down methane that will then be used and steam powered to create hydrogen fuel. That's a very loose outline of what that process is like. But yeah, those two are also, I think they're considered more environmentally friendly than blue hydrogen, but not as good as green.
So I saw in your reporting that blue hydrogen is one of the more common forms. If there's ways to capture and store the carbon that gets produced so that, it doesn't end up in the atmosphere, then why are some people here so worried about it?
Yeah, so environmental advocates, for one, say that it's not a guarantee that zero methane emissions will be released or zero carbon dioxide emissions will be released, right? Even with carbon capture, I think a really good rate is maybe like 95%. So it's not zero emission. It's not like green hydrogen. The other concern is that there's not enough power within the state to regulate that sort of new industry to make sure that the pipelines are built safely or they're being used safely, that they won't result in leaks. There's also concerns that injection wells, which are sort of like these deep underground wells that are also similarly used for fracking. This is a different kind, but that's like a common comparison, that it'll result in earthquakes or in other sort of like leaches of chemicals into water sources. It's just a lot of new endeavors that Pennsylvania doesn't have experience, monitoring, overseeing. So there's a lot of concern that, if we do get this money and if we do end up building hydrogen wells, how are we going to do it in a safe way?
This sort of reminds me of when fracking first came to Pennsylvania, and I'm curious if these concerns connect at all to our state's history with fracking and what happened here.
Yeah, no, I think nearly every environmental advocate I've talked to has said we don't want to repeat a fracking. Like, that's something where it happened very quickly and sort of there wasn't enough time for regulations and like a structure to be put in place to oversee that industry, according to the environmental advocates. So with hydrogen, there's a lot of discussion happening now with the knowledge that, this is a decades-long project and they want to sort of try to get in on the ground floor and put in some of this oversight.
Are there any states that have established hydrogen hubs already that Pennsylvania could look to as a model for how to set this up?
I believe Texas was starting one. I don't think it's completely set up yet, but they were like in the process of building one. But again, like, hydrogen is part of the reason there's so much discussion around hydrogen now is because of this like $10 billion investment, where before it just wasn't financially like feasible to create these hydrogen hubs, because it's so much cheaper and easier to just get fossil fuels and use that energy instead. So there's not too many examples, that at least that I know of hydrogen plants in the country.
So if they came here, we would really be kind of on the cutting edge of this.
Yeah. And that's something that environmental advocates I've talked to said, where like, this is a huge deal for DOE to give this much money for like a discovery developmental project where it's like a huge show of investment and promise in this like burgeoning energy industry.
What's the payoff here? What would it mean for Pennsylvania's economy if we got these hubs?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's potentially billions of dollars coming into the state to get at the ground floor of a new energy industry that, is really on the up and up. Like, it's in the new energy economy, and with all the money coming in from IIJA and IRA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, it's just sort of a really great time to be energy producer or working in like climate engineering and green energy. And some of the applications also included sort of like a community agreement sort of aspect where they're either working with local universities or local organizations, local unions, sort of things like that, to create like prevailing wage jobs and sort of foster growth in the community. So that's sort of the community aspect that they're trying to sell with these applications.
So how is this all, playing out politically in Harrisburg?
Yeah, in Harrisburg, there's definitely a sense of pretty much all lawmakers are like, we want this money. There's some lawmakers who are more environmentally inclined who say, we want this money, but we want regulations too. The problem is for them that they're not really in the majority, right? Like, there's, by and large, most Democrats and pretty much all Republicans want more funding. So the regulation aspect of it is sort of not as important of a priority as getting the money is in the first place.
Do you have a sense of how people who might live near these hubs feel about them? I mean, I've read that there's some hope that they could provide union jobs, at least during the building phase. But putting that aside, do people even understand what might be coming into their communities?
I don't think that they understand because we don't fully as someone whose job is to try to find out what's going to happen, I don't fully know. These applications, again, they're all private. They're all supposed to contain an environmental justice aspect. So that's a part of the federal requirements, that there is a special focus towards the communities that are most impacted by climate change. But we don't know what that will look like. Does that mean giving money to certain towns to subsidize economic development programs? Does that mean, or does that mean just hiring a few people to say, we're environmental justice people and we're going to monitor this? So it's sort of up in the air. I think, vaguely we know where the plants will be, but even then, it's just not super clear what the long-term effects will be.
So still a lot of questions, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
Kate Huang-Pu is government reporter for Spotlight PA. We'll have a link to her reporting on hydrogen hubs in our show notes. Kate, thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, an update. Since we talked to Kate, the feds have decided on 7 total hydrogen hubs all over the country, including the one that's planned for our own backyard. It's called the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub, or ARCH2. And the 12 companies involved, they plan to make hydrogen from natural gas. They're supposed to store and capture their carbon emissions, so this should be a blue hydrogen hub. Meanwhile, Governor Josh Shapiro just signed a bill into law that lays the groundwork for the state to regulate carbon capture and storage. But this is also new. It's still unfolding, so we will definitely be keeping an eye on things. And if you have your own questions or you just want to learn more, the folks behind ARCH2 are holding a virtual community meeting on August 16th at noon. We'll include a link with more information in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you enjoyed the show, we would love if you could tell a friend, rate us, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you then. Oh, why can I not speak today?